The Ties That Bind. Chapter 1. A morning like any other. Mark Thompson's morning routine was as predictable as the sunrise. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the modest yet well-kept suburban home as he prepared breakfast for his 6 children. Mark, a man of quiet dignity in his late 40s, had an air of calm about him, even in the chaos of mornings filled with mismatched socks, misplaced homework, and a clatter of cereal bowls. "Sarah, can you check on Noah?" Mark called from the kitchen. "He's been awfully quiet upstairs." "Already on it!" Sarah's voice rang back. At 15, Sarah was more than just the eldest sibling. She was the rock of the family, helping her father hold things together. Mark smiled as he flipped a pancake. Downstairs, Jake, 12, and perpetually on the verge of rebellion, was attempting to sneak past breakfast. "Not so fast," Mark said, catching him mid-step. "Pancakes first, adventure later." "Adventure?" Jake scoffed, but he sat down, a smirk tugging at his lips. Ethan, 10 years old, shuffled in quietly, his book clutched tightly to his chest. He gave a small nod to his father and took a seat. Mark noticed, as he often did, Ethan's tendency to linger in the background. He made a mental note to engage Ethan more later. Lily, 8, was already at the table, a pencil in hand as she doodled on the back of a math worksheet. Her curly hair bounced as she hummed to herself, lost in her artistic world. Mia, 6, raced into the room like a whirlwind, her energy unmatched. She nearly toppled a chair in her quest to grab a pancake. "Slow down, Mia," Sarah said, appearing with Noah in tow. The 4-year-old toddled in, clutching his favorite stuffed animal. He climbed onto a chair next to Lily, who handed him a crayon. This was their dynamic, chaotic but loving. Mark surveyed the scene as he placed the last pancake on the table. His chest swelled with pride. They weren't perfect, but they were his. Chapter 2. A Father's World. Mark had built his life around his family. After retiring as a school teacher, he poured his energy into a non-profit he had founded. The organization, Foundations for Families, provided resources and scholarships to children from diverse family structures. His work had gained recognition, bringing him into circles of affluent donors and corporate sponsors. But Mark remained grounded. For him, his nonprofit wasn't just a job. It was a mission inspired by his own experiences. He wanted to help children find stability and belonging, no matter their background. That afternoon, Mark attended a fundraising meeting with his board of directors. As he presented the nonprofit's progress, he felt the familiar satisfaction of making a difference. Yet, his mind often drifted back to his children. Returning home that evening, Mark was greeted by chaos. Jake and Mia were arguing over a broken toy. Ethan was sulking in a corner, and Sarah was trying to mediate. Mark stepped in, his voice calm but firm, and diffused the situation. Later, as the younger kids settled in for the night, Mark sat with Sarah on the couch. "How's school going?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "Busy," she admitted, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I'm managing. I just worry about Ethan sometimes. He seems distant." Mark nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've noticed too. I'll talk to him." Chapter 3. The Letter. The following morning, Mark's routine was interrupted by an envelope on the doorstep. It was unmarked except for his name scrawled in neat handwriting. Curious, he opened it and began to read. By the time he finished, his hands were trembling. The letter claimed that 2 of his children, Ethan and Mia, were not biologically his. It provided no evidence, just a cruel assertion. Mark sat down heavily, his mind racing. Who would send this? And why? Was it true? He thought of Ethan, the quiet boy who had always seemed different, and Mia, whose mischievous grin could light up a room. The idea of losing them, even in the hypothetical sense, was unbearable. Mark placed the letter in his desk drawer, resolving to investigate quietly. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it gnawed at him. Chapter 4. A Seed of Doubt. Mark spent the day trying to focus on his work at the nonprofit, but the anonymous letter lingered in his thoughts like an unwelcome shadow. He had built his organization on the principle of family unity and the belief that love transcended biology or circumstances. Yet, here he was, grappling with a truth that threatened to undermine his entire identity as a father. He couldn't ignore it. That evening, after putting the younger children to bed, He called Laura, his lawyer, and an old friend. "Laura, I need your help," he said after explaining the letter. Laura's voice was calm but firm. "Mark, this could be anything. A prank, a mistake, or something more serious. Before jumping to conclusions, we need to handle this carefully. Have you considered a DNA test?" The idea churned Mark's stomach. "What if it's true?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Laura's reply was gentle. "Then you'll need to decide what being a father means to you. But remember, a piece of paper can't erase the years of love and commitment you've given those kids." Mark thanked her and hung up, feeling both comforted and unsettled. He stared at the letter again, his mind racing. Chapter 5. Family Ripples. The following week, Mark tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but his children were quick to notice something was off. Sarah, ever perceptive, confronted him one evening. "Dad, you've been distracted lately," she said. "Is everything okay?" Mark hesitated. He didn't want to burden her, but knew she wouldn't let it go. "It's nothing to worry about, sweetheart," he said finally. "Just some issues at work." Sarah frowned but didn't press further. Meanwhile, the other children picked up on the tension in their own ways. Jake became more rebellious, testing boundaries at every turn. Lily's drawings took a darker tone, and Ethan grew even more withdrawn. The breaking point came when the younger kids overheard Mark talking to Laura about the letter. Later that evening, Ethan approached him timidly. "Dad," he began, his voice trembling, "do you not want me anymore?" Mark's heart broke. He knelt down, pulling Ethan into a hug. "Ethan, don't ever think that. You are my son no matter what." Ethan clung to him, but Mark could feel the boy's unease. Chapter 6. Facing the question. Unable to bear the tension, Mark decided to get the DNA test. He didn't tell the children, but he shared his decision with Laura. "I just need to know," he explained. Laura arranged for the test at a discreet clinic. As Mark handed over the samples, he felt a pang of guilt. Was he betraying Ethan and Mia by doubting their place in his family? The results would take 2 weeks, and in that time, the cracks in the family's foundation began to show. Jake's behavior worsened, and even Sarah struggled to maintain her usual composure. One evening, Mark found Lily crying in her room. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "I heard what you said to Laura," she admitted. "Are Ethan and Mia going away?" Mark sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "No one is going anywhere," he assured her. "No matter what, we're a family. That won't change." But even as he said the words, he wondered if he was lying. Chapter 7. The Results. When the results finally arrived, Mark opened the envelope with trembling hands. His worst fears were confirmed. Ethan and Mia were not biologically his. For a moment, the room seemed to spin. He thought of Mia's infectious laughter, Ethan's quiet strength, and the years they had spent together. The results didn't change any of that, but they added a new layer of complexity to his love for them. Mark knew he couldn't keep the truth to himself. That evening, he gathered the family in the living room. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice steady, despite the storm inside him. "I got some news today. Ethan and Mia are not biologically my children." The room fell silent. Ethan's face crumpled, and Mia clung to Sarah, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jake stormed out of the room, and Lily looked at Mark with wide, frightened eyes. "But listen to me," Mark continued, his voice breaking. "This doesn't change anything. You are my children, every single one of you. Biology doesn't define a family. Love does." Chapter 8. Holding On. The days that followed were fraught with tension. Ethan avoided Mark, and Mia refused to let go of Sarah's side. Even Jake seemed more subdued, his usual defiance replaced with quiet resentment. Mark reached out to each child individually, trying to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. He took Ethan out for a quiet afternoon at the park, where they finally talked. "I feel like I don't belong," Ethan admitted. Mark placed a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, belonging isn't about blood. It's about the bond we share. And I love you more than words can say." Gradually, the family began to heal. They had a long way to go, but the foundation of their love remained intact. Chapter 9. Climax. Mark decided to confront the situation head-on. He contacted the hospital where Ethan and Mia were born, hoping to uncover the truth about the mix-up. The family joined him for the meeting, a show of solidarity despite their fears. At the hospital, they were met with apologies and explanations. An administrative error had caused the mix-up, and the hospital pledged to help locate the biological children. During the meeting, Ethan burst into tears. "I don't care about biology," he cried. "You're my dad, and I don't want anyone else." Mark pulled him into a hug, his own tears falling. "And you're my son. Always." Chapter 10. Healing. As the hospital began its search, the Thompsons focused on healing. Family meetings became a regular occurrence, where everyone shared their feelings. Mark also threw himself into his nonprofit work, channeling his experiences into helping other families navigate similar challenges. One day, Sarah presented him with a proposal. "What if we started a program for families like ours?" she suggested. Mark's heart swelled with pride. "That's a brilliant idea," he said. Chapter 11. Moving forward. Months later, the hospital located Ethan and Mia's biological parents. Mark arranged a meeting, ensuring it was on neutral ground. The encounter was emotional but respectful, and both families agreed to keep in touch for the children's sake. Mark emphasized that Ethan and Mia's place was with him. "They are my children, and I love them unconditionally," he told the other family. Chapter 12. Epilogue. Years later, Mark sat in the audience at Sarah's graduation. As she crossed the stage, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. His children, each unique, resilient, and full of love, had grown into remarkable individuals. Ethan sat beside him, now a confident young man. "Thanks for never giving up on us, Dad," he said. Mark smiled, his heart full. "I'm the lucky one." As the family posed for a picture, Mark reflected on their journey. They had faced challenges that could have torn them apart, but love had bound them together. And that, he realized, was what truly made them a family.